we're moving into the so-called confessions of Jeremiah. Traditionally, there are 5 confessions. They are scattered into different sections from chapter 12 to chapter 20. We will see in rather detail the first one, and the one in chapter 15 is going to be very important. Before that, we have 2 acted parables of Jeremiah that will be very important, interesting, I would say. And then we move forward. So I am originally I was thinking of taking all the 5 confessions together. Then I thought I would still proceed chronologically. So most probably we will finish all the 5 by tomorrow's class. Okay, well, I will share the screen. So till we learn by heart this passage, Jeremiah 29:11. You know, there's a computer program that has given a scaling of different biblical verses. You know, from all the 73 books of the Bible, as according to the popularity. And this verse, chapter 29:11, is placed 29th in the entire list of biblical, thousands of biblical verses in the entire Bible. So I thought we would recite it 2-3 times more until we learn this by heart. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. One more verse, which is part of the theme for today. Listen to my voice and do all that I command you. So shall you be my people, and I will be your God, that I may perform the oath that I swore to your ancestors, to give them a land flowing with milk and honey as at this day. Then I answered, so be it, Lord. This is the formula of the covenant on Mount Sinai. You shall be my people, and I will be your God. Chapter 11 is placed in the context of this covenant made at Mount Sinai, fidelity to this covenant, and the infidelity. Okay, these are the themes that are highlighted in chapter 11. Okay, let us proceed. Chapters 11 to 13 have the theme of the broken covenant. Okay, please remember that Deuteronomic principle. Fidelity brings blessing, and infidelity invites curse. So faithfully observing the covenant commandments that the Lord gave, the covenant made at Mount Sinai, will serve the foundation for the so-called principle of Deuteronomy. Okay, chapter 11, verse 1 to 5. We saw that. So we are just summarizing the whole section on the covenant. We have seen all this, just summarizing it. The beginning of chapter 11, prophet speaks against the complacency of Jerusalemites under the influence of the Vedic covenant. I have referred to this a couple of times in 2 Samuel chapter 7. By now, I'm sure you are familiar with the two principles with which the people in Jerusalem were complacent. The Zion tradition and the Davidic tradition. Okay. So they believed that irrespective of their moral standing, Yahweh would guarantee their protection. The dynasty of David will last forever. Zion, the city of God, the Temple Mount, will remain forever and ever. So these two principles of Zion tradition and the Vedic tradition, the Vedic promise covenant, made the people complacent. So it is in this or against this background that prophet speaks or condemns them. Verse 3 is a citation from Deuteronomy 27:26. The reference to milk and honey. Okay, the land, the phrase milk and honey will immediately bring to the mind of people the promise of the promised land given to them through the patriarchs and renewed through Exodus, through Moses, and later Joshua. The covenant violation was on the fold of the prophetic teaching. So he reminded them that your ancestors did not fulfill the Sinaitic covenant, and you are behaving like your forefathers and breaking the covenant. Okay. A summary of the whole section so far. So Jeremiah weaves together the traditional material concerning the judgment that would result from the people's failure to keep the covenant. So people had broken the covenant by abandoning their God, Yahweh God, and worshipping the Baals. So using the traditional covenantal language, you can check it up in Deuteronomy 27:15-26, the promise of blessing in chapter 28 of Deuteronomy. So making use of this traditional covenantal language, Jeremiah described the curse resulting from the breaking of the covenant. It's very similar to the temple sermon that we studied in Jeremiah chapter 7. So to situate ourselves, see, the ancestors, they sinned against Yahweh by breaking the tenets of the covenant made at Mount Sinai. But a second chance was given. A second opportunity existed through the reform of Josiah. But they failed in this second chance given to take the opportunity. They went back to idolatry and false hope. We saw that the reforms initiated by Josiah did not last too long after his untimely death. People went back to idolatry and they kept thinking about the false hopes that Yahweh will protect them and sacrifices will avert dangers. Again, we refer to this several times. The futility of sacrifice when they are done without the heart for compassion and justice. When there is the hypocrisy of cult, the hypocrisy of cult. So sacrifices will not avert dangers because they are driven not by love and compassion, but because of false hope. The disappointment and sorrow of God are evident in the words of Jeremiah that we see in the chapter 11 and 12. Okay, let's move to the confessions of Jeremiah. Uh, the confessions, it's a longer passage. As I said, it is going from chapter 11, verse 18, going up to chapter 20. Chapter 20, verse 14 and following. So they are scattered in different texts. So traditionally, there are five laments of Jeremiah known as the confessions. Confessions of Jeremiah. What are they? They are personal complaints. They are reflections emanating from the inner life of the prophet. In some way, the sufferings of the prophet, which resulted in his confessions, also reflected the condition of the community and God's own sufferings. Jeremiah identified himself with the community and participated in their own suffering. So when we look at the different passages, these so-called confessions, we see that the anguish of Jeremiah was real. All the more because it did not arise from his personal suffering alone, but was a reflection of the suffering of his own people and the suffering of his own God. So the God of Israel is not a God who lives on a high mountain. He lives with his own people. Lives with his own people. Jehovah Shammah, God is here. Emmanuel, God is with us. A God who identified himself with the suffering slaves in Egypt. Read Exodus chapter 2 and 3 and so on. So, when the people of God suffer, God also suffers. So for Jeremiah, his anguish was real because of three things: his own personal suffering, the sufferings of his people, and because of the sufferings of people, the suffering of God. The first confession is found from chapter 11, verse 18 to chapter 12, verse 6. That's the first confession. I have given here the traditional, the classical five confessions. You know, 11, 18 to 12, 6. Second, 15, 10 to 21. We'll take that in tomorrow's class. Third confession, 17, 14 to 18. That too tomorrow. Fourth confession, 18, 18 to 23. And fifth confession, 27 to 20. You know what I've projected here are the traditional five confessions of Jeremiah. It is possible that you come across commentaries that state that there are even 8 confessions. Okay, it is possible, but I would stand with the traditional understanding, and I would explain these. You will definitely find this text, the first confession, some similarity to the text in the gospel. Okay, it's once again an occasion to identify the link between Jesus and Jeremiah. So the title is The Lamb Led to the Slaughter. The Lamb led to the slaughter. And you know the text very well. When you say the Lamb led to the slaughter. Okay. In verse 18 onwards to 23, okay, that's the end of chapter 11. An innocent lamb about to be slaughtered. An innocent lamb about to be slaughtered. And the second part, that's in chapter 12, 1 to 6, the prosperity of the wicked and the plight of the righteous. This is a very serious problem of theodicy, the prosperity of the wicked and the plight of the righteous. A question that came up from the time of Job and continued up to the time of Jesus and going on in our own times. Different religions have tried to look for a solution to this problem of the existence of evil, and why the wicked would prosper and the righteous will suffer. So this is a oft repeated theme. Okay, the confessions of Jeremiah, and even this first one, would be one of the best, direct, candid, and intimate prayers found in the entire Old Testament. Yeah. The first confession of Jeremiah, the lamb led to the slaughter. The background. There is a plot against the life of Jeremiah. He learns that he is the unwitting object, gentle lamb. You can find that find a parallel in chapter 53, verse 7 of Isaiah. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. Like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. Okay. So there is a difference, okay, between the prophetic passage of Jeremiah and that of Isaiah. They look similar, but it is not. See, in Isaiah, the so-called suffering servant, the servant suffers silently. He is unjustly condemned, executed, and ignominiously buried. That is the so-called servant song in Isaiah. While the Jeremiah text refers to the lamb led to the slaughter, but Jeremiah is not silent. So too, Job, the book of Job in the beginning, he is also not silent. Okay, now come back to Jeremiah. So, Jeremiah knows that he is the unwitting object of an assassination plot, and he prays the omniscient, all-knowing God for protection. He knows that he has been, this is instigated by his own immediate family and acquaintance. Friends, you know, the pain is doubled when you know the enemies are not those coming from outside the country. Enemies are not your adversaries from a faraway place. They are your own kith and kin. And that's the pain, the anguish of Jeremiah. But that's not the end. He realizes, or he was fully convinced, that God was going to punish Judah for their sins. And so the agony continues because he's part of the people, his own people. Okay, so the background to this first confession, we have seen that he preached against Davidic and Zion traditions, questioned the complacency of those in Jerusalem, and that naturally infuriated the fellow Jews who decided to get away with him, to do away with him. He was accused of being non-patriotic, anti-national, and was guilty of treasons. Okay, this takes place 600 years before Christ. And that was the only time this took place. We know history repeats itself throughout history when uncomfortable truths were spoken out, when dictatorial leadership were questioned. So best way is to brand one as anti-national or non-patriotic, and so guilty of treason. And Jeremiah was, in a way, inverted commas, a patron of those who suffer because they speak out the truth. So prophet compared himself to a sheep being led to a slaughterhouse. That is the figure of a complete innocence and simple confidence. Confidence, innocence of a lamb, and moving to the slaughterhouse of a simple confidence. I am giving you three parallel passages. One is, of course, the first column is from our prophet Jeremiah. Just compare with the two other passages. But I was like a gentle lamb led to the slaughter, and I did not know it was against me that they devised schemes. Isaiah 53, I just like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. Psalm 44:22. For your sake, we are being massacred all day long, treated as sheep to be slaughtered. See the parallel passages, from two prophets and the psalmist. Uh, okay, after that, soon after that, there is another image that of a tree about to be cut down in the bloom of life, a tree with its sap. The, so two image. One is of a lamb that is being led to the slaughterhouse, and second is the tree with its fruit. Let us destroy the tree with its fruit. Let us cut him off from the land of the living, so that his name will no longer be remembered. Here, the tree with bloom of life is the first of many horticultural metaphors that we are going to see in Jeremiah. It's the first one. Just earlier in verse 16, it was announced that the people are God's green olive tree. God's green olive tree. The Lord once called you. Okay? God named Israel a green olive tree, fair with goodly fruit. See, those of you who are familiar with Palestinian agriculture and the Mediterranean plant, the olive, because olive oil is so important for those living in the Mediterranean area. See, God's called them as green olive tree, but that tree would be cut down, and the people are threatening to cut the prophets down like a green tree. See, earlier Yahweh had called Israel green olive tree, and because of their own stupidity, infidelity, they would be cut down. And now those people who are threatened are going to cut Jeremiah like a green tree. It's a parallel passage. Jeremiah 11:10. Let us destroy the tree in its strength, Let us cut him off from the land of the living, so that his name may no longer be remembered. Parallel passage in Psalm, they say, come, let us wipe them out as a nation, that the name of Israel be remembered no more. So, what is the response to this? Response to the cry. It's an autobiographical statement, no? But I was like a gentle lamb led to the slaughter. So it is not the verse and verse 20. The prophet takes recourse to God's regal power. The word, Lord of hosts, Adonai Sabaoth, Jehovah, Yahweh Sabaoth, God of hosts. And that is not accidental, because God of the armies, God of the warriors, he has got tremendous military power. He has got suzerainty over even the greatest of the world powers. He says, you who judge righteously, who try the heart and the mind, let me see your retribution upon them. For to you I have committed my cause. To you I have committed my cause. No, prophet is expecting God's intervention, because Yahweh implements the justice. Jeremiah seeks the death of these men, because that is as per the law of retaliation accepted in all the three Pentateuchal law codes. The covenantal code in Exodus, Levitical code in the book of Leviticus, and the Deuteronomy code in the book of Deuteronomy. All the three codes unanimously agree upon the law of retaliation, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and so on. So the result of this prayer, that they will be punished by sword and famine. I will make a note on a particular phrase in the NRSV, verse 20, second part. Lord of hosts, who judge righteously, who try the heart and the mind, who try the heart and mind, the Jerusalem Bible of mind and heart. So literally, over loins and heart. The mind in English, it is translated as mind, because to translate as loins in modern English looks very strange. So most of the modern translations will change it into mind and heart. But this phrase is typically Jeremiah. The expression comes from Jeremiah. Very, very exceptional case. One or two other places in the Bible you get this phrase, but it's otherwise all in the book of Jeremiah. The reason, okay, those of us who are not familiar with biblical Hebrew anatomy, I mentioned something similar earlier. See, the loins were considered the seat of inner reflections and affections. Take a number of passages, many passages in the book of Psalms. I given just a sample from the book of Proverbs and Job. The loins were considered the seat of inner reflections and affections. I have said earlier, the function of a heart, the function of the womb, compassion, the same word. raham, is the same word for mercy, compassion, and the womb. So basically, it is biblically a kind of a feminine virtue. The second part of this section, which is chapter 12, 1 to 6, the first confession of Jeremiah, is a perennial problem that is addressed. What is that? The prosperity of the wicked and the plight of the righteous. You know, a number of sincere people have questioned God. See the number of books that came out on this question, on this um, problem, the theodicy or problem of suffering. When bad things happen to good people, some of the best-selling books. Where is God when it hurts? Okay, there are. So this question is asked by Jeremiah. The main issue, as I mentioned, the perennial problem of the suffering of the just. Psalm 37, 73, or entire book of Job. Jeremiah here questions the nearly universal idea that the wicked always suffer and the righteous always prosper. The wicked ostensibly faithful and they prosper. The wicked ostensibly faithful and they prosper. That's in the book of Job, chapter 21, Psalm 73, and so on. See, this is a perennial problem. I think that's every sincere believer has had some experience of faithful, law-abiding citizens and Christians, human beings, endure a lot of suffering, while the wicked and the corrupt go scot-free. Okay. So this is a problem. Jeremiah is bringing out the issue. Although Yahweh is righteous, the problem of the prosperity of the wicked is difficult to be reconciled with God's justice. Is it? See, two quotations from Jeremiah, rather four quotations to deal with this issue. Why does the way of the wicked prosper? Why do all who are treacherous thrive? Job. When a country falls into the power of the wicked, he veils the faces of his judges, or not he, who else? Yeah. So, I think these are experience. When the country falls into the power of the wicked people, even the judges, even all the forms of all the branches of the machinery, they all turn a blind eye or deaf ear. Okay, Habakkuk 1:4. For the wicked surround the righteous, so justice goes forth perverted, because the wicked are administering justice. Job 21:7. Why do the wicked live, reach old age, and grow mighty in power? Yeah. Otherwise, according to the Deuteronomistic history, according to the Deuteronomistic principle, just the opposite. the law-abiding, God-fearing person will live up to ripe 70 years or 80 years, and they will rule for 40 years. But the experience was not always the same. That's why Job is asking this question. Why do the wicked live, reach old age, and grow mighty in power? Okay. Verse 3, chapter 12, verse 3. The prophet expresses his innocence and proposes a sentence against the wicked. They should be led to the slaughterhouse. I will read verse 3 for you. But you, O Lord, know me. You see me and test me. My heart is with you. Pull them out like sheep for the slaughter. Set them apart for the day of slaughter. The prophet is expressing his innocence, and he is asking God. So instead, he who was innocent is now being led to the slaughterhouse. The prophet is asking, no, instead of me, let the wicked be led to the slaughterhouse. And the result, the severe drought that the land experiences, says, is due to the wickedness of the people. The answer to the complaint made by Jeremiah is not at all positive, but disappointing. 5:6. The present threats are modest compared to what will come in the future. Verse 5. He uses the image of two, let's say, comparisons or two proverbs: running a foot race with another man and a horse. So you're running with the foot runners, and how do you compare? You're running with a horse. Or the second one is about the image. The second image compares the present to living in a safe land and the future to living in the wilderness of Jordan, perhaps an image of exile, wilderness, an anticipation of the exilic experience. So there is, the Jordan Valley is a very dangerous area filled with wild animals. So according to Jeremiah, he uses two proverbs with the proverbs of running a foot race with another man and a horse, then living in a safe land, and the future to living in the wilderness of Jordan. So, according to God, the worst is yet to come. So prophet still has to live with the uncertainty. Look at verse 6, 12:6. There is a warning. Now, it is applicable to every person that Jeremiah should not trust anybody, including his own family members. No, it sounds very pessimistic. So he said, even your kinsfolk and your own family, even they have dealt treacherously with you. They are in full cry after you. Do not believe them, though they speak friendly words to you. Yeah. Jeremiah's own family are named among the conspirators mentioned earlier in chapter 11, 18 to 23. So what's the hidden meaning? In one sentence, trust no one except God. Trust no one except God. God is the only one who is trustworthy. So we conclude this section. For Jeremiah, suffering formed part of his prophetic office. When he became aware of the plot against his life, he cried out to the Lord, "To you I have committed my cause." With your own Bible, it would be useful to highlight or underline this part of verse. Not that, yeah, the reference is wrong. The reference is wrong. Yeah, it's correct. Reference is correct. Chapter 11, verse 20. To you I have committed my cause. To you I have committed my cause. So prophetic office of Jeremiah reminds all of us that, like him, it is beneficial to cry out to God. To you I have committed my cause, and not to any external pressures. Okay, then also the section, the concluding, and this, summarizing, concluding this section. Okay, that suffering was part of his public ministry. Suffering was part of his prophetic ministry. And when he complained further about the injustice of the situation, the answer was far from comforting. Instead, he was told that there would be more suffering. More suffering. Okay, we go to 7, chapter 12, 7 to 17. It's about the sorrow of God. We saw the sorrow of Jeremiah, now sorrow of God. Very strange, isn't it? God is sorrowful. Think about it. Okay. This poem set on Yahweh's lips is in a lamentation form. The lamentation of God is also in a poetic form. He uses several figures like beloved of my heart, verse 7, lion, verse 8, birds of prey, verse 9, shepherds, verse 10. So led by, okay, these are several, beloved of my heart, lion, birds of prey, vineyard, verse 10, vineyard. There are many biblical figurative languages. And God laments the necessary ravaging of Judah. My house, or my heritage, verse 8. Verse 7, I have forsaken my house. And that reflects the Babylonian inspired raids of 601 BC. So led by several puppet rulers. That's why the expressions like birds of prey and shepherds as a response to the short-lived revolt of Jehoiakim. You know, when you read chapter 2, or sorry, second book of Kings, chapter 24, 1 to 4, we have a clear image or picture of this reality. See, when Nebuchadnezzar was busy fighting in Egypt, he could not concentrate much on coming to Israel. So Jehoiakim thought, yeah, that Babylon was not powerful enough. So he thought he could revolt against the big powers. But the decision was very foolish. So in verse 13, for example, speaking of the fierce anger of God, the invade. Okay, it's not. Yeah. Reference to vultures, beasts of the field, shepherds. They represent a coalition of several nations. So from history we know the raids of Chaldean hordes, the Aramaean. Remember the map that I showed you in the previous class? No? The Aramaean are the Syrians, so north of Israel, because they had to pass through the Babylonians have to pass through Syria to enter Israel. So Chaldean are the Babylonians, the Aramaeans, the Syrians, the Moabites and the Ammonites. Okay, the previous class I showed you the map. And Moabites and Ammonites are the distant cousins of Israel through they are the descendants of Lot. But throughout the history, they were fighting among themselves. They fought against Israel all the time. Again, this is attested in the second book of Kings. So Nebuchadnezzar commissioned all these Chaldean hordes, Arameans, Moabites, Ammonites to check the rebellion initiated by Jehoiakim till he would be able to come personally in 598-97. Okay, he would come and carry away the best of the people. Okay. Verses 14 to 17. Yeah. Judah's erstwhile enemies are converted. We get in the chapter 16. So, God will spare them when Judah is restored. Otherwise, they themselves will be destroyed. So God, keeps on offering chances, opportunities after opportunities. They always had a second chance, a third chance, a fourth chance. So how do we conclude this section? Jeremiah's lament is answered by a lament from God. God himself is lamenting. The divine lament portrays God as also suffering because of evil from the hardness of his own people. This passage gives a rare glimpse into the consternation and the anguish that evil causes God. The anguish is especially acute for him when his own people are responsible for it. The Lord expresses both love and hate for his people, and emotions we usually consider mutually exclusive. Love and hate. Love and hate. those two words come together because these two emotions are usually mutually exclusive. So the image of God as passionately involved with his world and his people. Okay, in one sentence, the sorrow of God expresses this image of God who is passionately involved with his world and his people. It is amazing to think that evil can cause God the same anguish that it causes man. I repeat, to think, it is amazing to think that evil can cause God the same anguish that it causes man. Now we come to two rather very strange parable, an acted out parable, an acted out parable by Jeremiah. Okay, just please keep this in mind. What are parables? You know, in a word coming from Greek language, parabole, 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 to place, throw side by side. Parables, we are very familiar in the New Testament, the Gospels, the parables. So they are very important to convey a message. Okay, when Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. I am the good shepherd. So, look at the central part. The details are not the most important thing. They are secondary. The details are secondary, but the focus, the main point. We are familiar with the stories of the Good Samaritan and the prodigal son, the Lazarus and the rich man. Yeah, there are details are there, but these stories convey a message. Good Samaritan. What's the purpose of the Good Samaritan? What's the purpose of the story of the prodigal son? The central figure, the Good Samaritan, the prodigal son, Lazarus, and the rich man. Uh, Some are, okay, there are two types of parables. One is literary parables. Literary parables are the parables that that are mostly found in the New Testament, the Gospels, like the parables that Jesus told, parables that Jesus instructed, used as medium of instruction. Parable of the Good Samaritan, the prodigal son, Lazarus, and the rich man. You know, for information, 1/3 of the entire teaching of Jesus, 1/3 of the entire teaching of Jesus was in the parables. There are, first is a literary parable, parables that are narrated, and secondly, there are acted out parables, parables that are acted out. Example, Jesus washing the feet of the disciples at the Last Supper. It was really an acted out parable to convey a very important message. And it conveyed more than the verbal teaching, this parable that acted out remained in the mind of people. That's why 2000 years after today, in hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of churches and altars, that parable, acted out parable by Jesus, is reenacted. So these are parables in action. So remember, literary parables and parables in action. So the parable of the loin linen cloth that we are going to see is an acted out parable or parables in action. It is very important from the part of the message that the prophet is going to convey. To us, the modern mind, it looks really bizarre. Very strange. Very strange. But remember, parables at times are meant to shock. And by shock, you're conveying a message, a teaching that should not be forgotten. Okay. So through the symbolic act, Jeremiah reiterates that Judah is rotten and now he deserves God's punishments. So I'm sure you have read this chapter 13 and maybe you found it very strange, but prophet had to give it to convey a message. So prophet Yahweh gave three commands to the prophet. Okay, one, buy a linen cloth and wear it. Verse 1. Go and buy yourself a linen loin cloth and put it on your loins, but do not dip it in water. Second, so he did what was told. So first command is to buy a linen cloth, it's a new cloth, and wear it. Second command, hide the loin cloth in the rocks by the Euphrates River. Verse 4. Take the loin cloth that you bought and are wearing and go down to the Euphrates and hide it. Hide it there in a cleft of the rock. Third command, recover the buried cloth after a time. That's in verse 6. After many days, the Lord said to me, go now to the Euphrates and take from there the loincloth that I commanded you to hide there. See, there could be a big confusion. But those of you are following NRSV, you will find a footnote for Euphrates. It says, or to para, in Hebrew, perath. Okay, that will try to explain. So now, if this event historically took place, around 601, around that time, 10 years or a few years before the arrival of the Babylonians, how Euphrates is mentioned. Did Jeremiah go all the way to Babylon and place this loincloth in the cleft, the cliff of in by the sea of Euphrates or river of the Euphrates River? The question is, the footnote gives us a clue. The new cloth is hidden not near Euphrates in Mesopotamia in Babylon, but at the Wadi Para, about today 6 kilometers north of Anathoth, which is very similar to the name Euphrates in Hebrew. As the footnote says, Parath in Para, sorry, here it is not Parath, Para in Joshua, the place name, the book of Joshua has given us Para 18:23, where there are rocky cliffs, it's in verse 4. But the Hebrew name of Euphrates is Perath. So Para, Perath, it's a pun, use of pun. So it is not that Jeremiah went to Euphrates, but used as a pun. And because as you in this slide, towards the end of this slide, that will remind something very important. Okay. Now, what's the message? So this man, in verse 7, then I went to the Euphrates and dug So he had hidden it, dug it out, and took the loin cloth from the place where I had hidden it. Now the loin cloth was ruined. It was good for nothing. It was good for nothing. Okay, you will have to. I will explain the historical nuance of this. Now look. Let's look at the meaning. In the parable of the loin cloth, the central likeness is the closeness of one's underclothes to one's person, because that is the cloth that is closest to a person, very intimate. And he says the closeness of one's underclothes to one's person as the measure of the closeness intended to exist between God and the people. Just like this undercloth is intimate for the person, the people are so close, intimate to God. And the burial of the loincloth in a cleft of the rock by the place Parat, where it rots, signifies the punishment of Israel for refusing to obey God and following strange gods instead. Verse 8 to 11. This is the pride of Judah, the evil people who refuse to hear my words and go after other gods. For us the loin, verse 11, for us the loin cloth clings to one's loins. So I made the whole house of Israel and the whole house of Judah cling to me, says the Lord, in order that they might be for me a people, they might be for me a people, a name, a praise, and a glory, but they would not listen. So look at those words, that they should cling to me, so in order that they might be for me a people, a name, a praise, a glory. Um, what I have given the slide is already I have said. It's a parable in action, and it's a symbol of, okay, this parat is a symbol of Babylon. When he says Euphrates, it is not, it points to the future event that they will be taken to Babylon in exile. So, this is these parables. You can suppose someone preaches for 1 hour, 2 hours, most people will fall asleep. Instead, they come out with an action. They pull out somebody, for example, from the crowd. Uh, it may be shocking for the person, and some strange action that will be remembered with a meaning. So when the people saw the action of the prophet, burying the loincloth and bringing the loincloth that is rotten, they will ask, why? Why? So the first part of the parable is the acting out, and the second part, verse 8 to 11, is the explanation of the action. So the conclusion is, as long as the people clung to God, they were preserved. When they sinned by abandoning the Lord and serving other gods, they became as useless as the loincloth. And the next parable, the allegory of the wine jar, verses 12 to 14. So, the second parable, I shall speak to them in this word, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel. Every wine jar should be filled with wine. See, this is a proverb that was used. Every wine jar should be filled with wine. This is the figure, symbol of drunkenness that invites divine judgment. The people of Judah will be full of drunkenness because the parable. When you are drunk, when somebody is drunk, there is the obvious loss of balance without equilibrium, bumping against one another, helplessly going out of control. Uh, they are inviting self-destruction. Imagine in a crowded city, someone is driving after getting drunk or walking along the street when there is busy traffic. You are gearing towards the self-destruction. And at this moment, don't blame God. Yahweh will not intervene to block the self-destruction caused by drunkenness because God has time and again warned. But He gives the freedom. And time and again, we have said no. When you turn into this self-destruction, prophet says Yahweh will not intervene to block this self-destruction because He respects freedom. He gave so many chances. Finally, you are responsible. We are responsible for our fate. The phrase, every jar shall be filled with wine, it is a proverb, it's a statement. So probably this was a phrase that people cried out at the pagan festivals that please fill every jar with wine so we can drink in the abundance. Okay, we go to chapter the last part of chapter 15, chapter 13. There are, in fact, it will go into the next chapters. The last opportunity to repent. There are three oracles of doom to conclude this section. Let us take verse 15 to 17. We call it as the dark night. Dark night. This is the last warning before the final blow. So, there's a possibility that sincere service of Yahweh might withhold the calamity that is announced. See, light will still be shining over the land. Light will still be shining over the land. Otherwise, the very land will be cast in darkness. It has got double significance, symbolizing both invasion, the enemy from the north, and the flight. People have to run away. Verse 17 is about the captivity that is imminent. They'll be led into captivity. Verse 18 to 19, the exile proper. The prophet speaks of King Jehoiakim, who was on the throne in Jerusalem for only 3 months. The reference in verse 18 to 19, the reference is to the king Jehoiakim, who lived for a very short duration as king. There is so when Jerusalem fell at the end of the siege in 598-97, King Jehoiakim and his queen mother and all the elite of the city were taken into Babylon. And probably Ezekiel was one among these. So it was in the 587. That's a reference to the king and the queen. The king and the queen. Yeah. Finally, we speak about the incurable sickness. verse 20, 20 and following. So Jerusalem is doomed once again. It is a reference to Babylonian victory at Carchemish in 605 that provided the occasion for this last warning, this prophecy, this oracle. So all Jerusalemites, the king, the people, and the entire city, because they all suffered punishment for the iniquity, or because of the iniquity, they have to suffer punishment. And crimes that they may have committed, accused of iniquity, abomination, adultery, and harlotry. So the enemy from the north is ready to come and snatch away the flock entrusted to the king. But still there is a possibility of repentance. Because he says, we are in verse verse 23. Verse 23 says, it may sound today as a racial statement. Okay, the sensibilities were different. It says, if not as difficult as Ethiopians having to change their skin color, or leopards the spots. It says it is impossible for leopards to change their skin color, or the spots that are on leopards. And Ethiopians are, they have a particular skin color. And Prophet says, no, it is not easy to change the skin color of the Ethiopians or as people of that area. Then we can still hope for a possibility. And verse 22, it's the context of idolatry, adultery. That word violated. Judah is assimilated to a prostitute because of her idolatrous practices. If you read those statements, verse 22, that your skirts are lifted up and you're violated. The translation is different. And also, so the whole context is of the adulterous practices, which is not unique in Jeremiah. Previously, Hosea has made this statement, and later the second Isaiah chapter 47 will make this statement. So it is against the adulterous practices of Israel. Okay, so the chapter ends with a slight hope for conversion for Israel. Then chapter 14, 15, 16, 17. Chapter 14, 15, 16, 17 speak of crime and punishment. I don't have to go into detail. Many of the things are repeated, but those lamentations, those confessions of Jeremiah, I will take in detail in the coming class. So chapter 14 to 17 speak of crime and punishment. Okay, so that's enough for today, and we will quickly go over to the rest tomorrow, and I hope to finish up all the confessions also. We'll cover although it's one day, I think I should be able to cover a number of chapters Because what is repeated, I will not take. I will highlight more of the confessions, lamentation of the prophet. Okay, so if we have some questions, I have a couple of questions from yesterday that I will take up tomorrow, hopefully. If there are questions, Brother Samuel.
There are no questions in the message box, but there is a doubt sent in my WhatsApp. The thing is Jeremiah chapter 11 verse 10c. Where is this in Jeremiah? I think that sometimes verses are divided into A, B, C.
Okay. Would you repeat the question once again?
Jeremiah chapter 11 verse 10c.
Okay.
Where is this in Jeremiah? This question.
Okay. Yeah, this is a question that many people may have. When I make a quotation, sometimes you find a verse, for example, verse 10, A, B, and C. See, for the a sentence is divided into different phrases, and in the NRSV or even RSV, it is sometimes easy with the punctuation, but not always easy. Often, each section is divided by a semicolon. As I said, it's not always, but often. Then it is easy to, for example, it was verse 10 or 11. Verse 10, no? Okay, they have turned back to the iniquities of their ancestors of old, who refused to heed my words. That is A. That is it is demarcated by a semicolon. They have gone after other gods to serve them. B. There is a semicolon after that. The house of Israel and the house of Judah have broken the covenant that I made with their ancestors. C. Okay, easy way, often easy way to find out that is A, B, C is because of the demarcation made with a semicolon. Okay, I think it is time. The questions that there are 2 or 3 questions that I will take up maybe tomorrow. So have a wonderful weekend and see you tomorrow. And please read the text and highlight some of the important passages that are relevant for us today and always. Okay. Good night. And before that, we conclude with the invocation to the Holy Trinity. Glory be to the Father and to the Son and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. God bless. May the peace of the Lord be with you always. And good night to you. Shalom, dear friends.